classmates. My name is Jimmy Levon, and today I'll be covering my signature assignment on intersectionality of transgender prisoners in administrative segregation units and Black women in the workplace.
Intersectionality. Intersectionality is the oppression and discrimination resulting from an overlap of an individual's various social identities. The theory was introduced by Kimberly Crenshaw, who knew that there were multiple social and minority identities, such as race, gender, sexuality, and class, that contributes to the specific type of systematic oppression and discrimination experienced by administrative segregation units, also known as AGSEG, the SHU, lockdown. Inmates are confined to a cell 23 to 24 hours per day. And Black women in the workplace having to maintain multiple personas. And in both of these cases, individuals are experiencing an in-depth of intersectionality, considering the different systems of oppression, specifically on how they're overlapped and how they compound on daily issues. Transgender women already face multiple intersecting layers of discrimination, such as racism, classism, and sexism, often do not have access to gender-affirming surgical procedures. And to be quite honest, not all transgender women desire such surgeries. Thus, the majority of transgender women who interact with the corrections department are housed in male prisons. And according to the 2015 U.S. Transgender Survey, a majority, 57% of transgender people are exposed to horrific rates of abuse by both staff and their fellow inmates, face physical and sexual assault at much higher rates than their counterparts. Instead of properly protecting transgender inmates, most prisons find it extremely convenient to push away and house these inmates in segregative units known as the lockdown. In an interview with KQED's Point of View, an inmate in the California Department of Corrections said, "They cut all my hair off and locked me away in a cell for 9 months by myself because they didn't want to put me with men and they couldn't put me with women." Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds extremely dehumanizing. After surviving such treatment, how can one return back to the general population and, most importantly, back into our communities after being released from administrative segregation? Numerous studies have documented that the harmful psychological effects of long-term solitary confinement, which can produce debilitating symptoms such as visual and auditory hallucination, hypersensitivity to noise and touch, insomnia and paranoia, uncontrollable feelings of rage and fear, and distortion of time and perception. Suffering from mental illnesses, sensory deprivation, being a felon, unskilled, not because you're choosing that lifestyle, but because instead of spending time being rehabilitated, you're locked away in a cage. When Kimberly Crenshaw introduced intersectionality, she had the Black woman in mind. She said, "If I am a Black woman, I have some disadvantages because I am a woman. And I have some disadvantages because I am Black. But I also have specific disadvantages because I am a Black woman, which neither Black men nor white women have to deal with." That's intersectionality. In the text shifting, there was a character named Jenny. Now, Jenny spoke of being two separate people and playing the role so long and losing sight of her authentic self, experiencing constant depression from the stressors of conforming and compromising into these makeshift roles as a means of survival. That is often the story of many Black women in the workplace. The authors also mentioned a subsection in chapter 6 that spoke of getting in the door, the challenges of being hired, which is a separate dilemma of its own. But there was a quote that really sat on my heart, and it said, "There is always a silent requirement that if you are Black, they have to be comfortable with you. So you have to try hard to find commonalities that overrides racial differences." For most Black women in the workplace, the oppression begins before you've been able to even introduce yourself. UCLA conducted a study where social scientists and psychologists have used Black sounding versus white sounding names to uncover various levels of discrimination via a blind correspondence audit experiment. Researchers found a difference in responses to names that Black women from different socioeconomic backgrounds gave their children, which suggests that there's another factor at play when observers perceive Black-sounding names. Deshawn was one of the most commonly used name given by a Black mother with a high school degree or less. Black mothers with a college education selected names like Jalen because it's much less likely to be associated as Black sounding. At the conclusion of the study, I was so embarrassed to know that this type of ignorance and discrimination exists. And then I sat quietly and thought back. Have I ever judged someone's capability and socioeconomic status based on their names? And if we were being honest, the answer would be yes. I have. We all have to check out our implicit biases, the attitudes and stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner because society, family, and traditions have conditioned our minds. And although those biases exist, all while putting your best foot forward, taking the same classes, tests, background checks, and screenings as your counterparts, you're still pushed to the back. Even the National Center for Education Statistics confirmed that Black women are now the most educated group in the United States, yet we still have a long way to go for pay equity. The Black woman in the workplace finding it difficult to get through the door, but once through the door, according to the Economic Policy Institute, the fastest growing wage gap are between white women and women of color. So beyond the pay gaps, at the intersection, it's who's hired, heard. Throughout this course, I have hearkened to my peers' various perspectives, and I appreciate the transparency from everyone, covering topics that are sometimes uncomfortable. And as a Black woman, I have never been in an institutional space to speak freely about everyday issues of oppression we face. As we emphasized on intersectionality, we have given one another the opportunity to identify groups in which we belong unapologetically. And we are able to share this information to every person we encounter. Personally, I want to reach the everyday Black girl who is going through the same or similar social and economic disparities that may have prohibited her from moving to the next phase in her life. And as a future psychologist, it is imperative that I introduce topics like this, especially to women of color who have yet to identify these mixed feelings and believe that their backs are against the wall, not knowing that people are aware of the multiple adverse circumstances you face. And it's okay. I see you. We see you. You are not alone.